Forget the clean, charming cowboy from the big screen. Everyday life in the Old West was dirty, monotonous, dangerous, and full of details the movies never dared to show. If you want the unfiltered truth, subscribe, because we're going to tell you everything right here. Number 1. Bath water was shared, and it got filthy. Before indoor plumbing, taking a bath was a ton of work. Someone had to draw water from the well, bucket by bucket, and heat it all on a wood-burning stove. Filling a bathtub took hours and a whole pile of firewood. After all that work, no one was going to throw the water out after just one person used it. So the family lined up, and the order followed the household hierarchy. The oldest man went first because he got the hot, clean water. Then came the other men and the boys. The women were next. The little children were at the end of the line, and the baby went last. By the time it was the baby's turn, the water was already lukewarm, gray, and full of everyone else's dirt floating around. That's why full-body baths weren't a regular thing. In many homes, they happened only a few times a year, usually in the spring when the weather warmed up. The rest of the year, people made do with a wash basin, a cloth, and homemade soap. They washed their face, hands, and neck, and went on with their day. Smelling like sweaty people was nothing to be ashamed of. It was normal, and everyone was in the same boat. Number 2. There was no toilet paper. Before 1900, hardly anyone in rural areas bought paper for that purpose. It wasn't because they were poor, it was just normal. People used whatever was available: leaves, dry grass, hay, old newspapers, and, in the corn belt, corn cobs. They were left over after the corn was shelled, cost nothing, and were kept in a bucket next to the toilet in the outhouse at the back of the yard. The change came through the mail. The Sears Roebuck catalog, launched in 1888, was sent free to millions of homes with hundreds of pages of thin, soft paper. After choosing a tool or a hat, the family would hang the catalog on a nail inside the outhouse. The habit was so common that the Old Farmer's Almanac started punching a hole in its cover in 1919, just so the book could hang on that nail. In the 1930s, Sears switched to glossy, coated paper. Complaint letters poured in. The new catalog was no longer useful for its old purpose. Factory-made toilet paper had been around since 1857, created by Joseph Gaiety, but it was expensive and seen as a luxury for city folks. It wasn't until 1935 that Northern advertised the first toilet paper guaranteed to be splinter-free, which says a lot about what came before. Number 3. The dentist worked without anesthesia. Imagine sitting in a barber's chair knowing the man in the apron is going to pull your tooth with a pair of pliers, and nothing is going to numb your mouth. In the Old West, toothaches were a regular part of life. Cheap sugar had made its way to rural areas, and tooth decay came with it. The person who treated it was rarely a doctor. It was the corner barber, the blacksmith on Main Street, or some guy passing through town with a wagon and a sign. The favorite tool was the dental key, a device that twisted and broke more bone than tooth. The patient drank whiskey, bit down on a piece of leather, and endured it. At traveling shows, a band would play loudly on purpose to drown out the screams. The thing is, anesthesia already existed. Horace Wells used nitrous oxide in 1844, and William Morton demonstrated ether in Boston in 1846. But it took decades for those methods to reach frontier towns, and there was a trained dentist in the middle of all that, John Henry Holliday, who graduated in Philadelphia in 1872. Tuberculosis ruined his practice. No one wanted to sit in the chair of a man who coughed up blood. That's how Doc traded the pliers for the card table. Number 4. Water could kill you faster than a bullet. On the journey west, the greatest danger didn't come from an ambush or an outlaw. It came from your canteen. Between 1849 and 1860, cholera swept across the Oregon Trail. In 1852 alone, the worst year, thousands died between the Missouri River and the Rocky Mountains. Journals from the time say you could follow the trail by looking at the wooden crosses along the roadside. There was another problem, so-called alkali water. In parts of Wyoming and Nevada, pools of water shimmered beneath a white crust of salts and soda. It looked like good water. The soapy taste only hit with the first sip, and by then it was too late. Anyone who drank it would spend days suffering from diarrhea and dehydration. Cattle would die bloated right there, and cowboys learned to watch the cattle before filling their canteens. No one was talking about germs yet. Germ theory only became established after 1860. But in practice, people had already figured out that boiled coffee didn't make them sick. That's why cowboys carried Arbuckle coffee in their saddlebags and drank it strong and hot all day long. Whiskey also did the job. In the end, that habit of drinking black coffee from sunrise to sunset was what kept a lot of people alive on the frontier. Number 5. The bed was crawling with bedbugs and lice. Picture this. You pay for a room, and what you get is a whole night of being bitten. In the 19th century, cheap hotels, roadside boarding houses, and miners' lodgings were breeding grounds for bedbugs, fleas, and lice. The insects lived in cracks in the wood, inside straw mattresses, and in the seams of the blankets. When the lights went out, they came out to feed. There was another detail that would sound absurd today. The bed wasn't always yours alone. Boarding house owners rented the same mattress to 2 or 3 men on the same night, and the guest would wake up next to a stranger he had never seen before. In some places, a man slept sitting up, leaning against a rope stretched from wall to wall, and in the morning the owner would loosen the rope so everyone would get up. Changing clothes didn't solve the problem. Lice stayed in the seams of shirts and pants and traveled along with their owner. The only option was to run a hot iron over the seams, and even then the eggs survived. Anyone who spent weeks on the road eventually accepted it as part of the price of traveling, and scratching became as common a habit as taking off your hat. Number 6. There was one dish at camp that nobody asked for twice. On the trail, the menu barely changed. Beans cooked in an iron pot, salt pork, sourdough bread baked in a Dutch oven, and coffee so strong people joked it could hold a horseshoe upright. That went on for weeks at a time, from Texas to the stockyards in Kansas. The cook, nicknamed Cookie, was in charge. He ruled over the chuck wagon, the kitchen wagon Charles Goodnight put together in 1866, and kept the sourdough starter close to his body in cold weather, because without it, there would be no bread the next day. When a calf broke a leg or couldn't keep up with the drive, it became dinner. That's where son of a bitch stew came from. Heart, liver, tongue, kidney, bone marrow, and a piece of intestine called marrow gut, all chopped up and boiled for hours. It wasn't about being fancy. It was about using the whole animal. What they really lacked was fresh fruit and vegetables. Without vitamin C came bleeding gums, loose teeth, and wounds that wouldn't heal. Scurvy, the same disease that plagued sailors. Many cowboys finished the trip weaker than when they left home. Number 7. Most cowboys were poor, and many of them weren't even white. A real cowboy made between $25 and $40 a month. He slept on the ground, ate dust, and spent up to 3 months driving cattle from Texas to Kansas, covering more than 800 miles. Many of them weren't even 20 years old. Historians estimate that 1 out of every 3 cowboys on the major cattle trails was black or Mexican. Many black men who were freed after the Civil War headed west because no one there asked about their past. And almost everything about the job came from Mexican vaqueros. The lasso, the rodeo, leather chaps, even the word ranch. Nat Love was born enslaved in Tennessee and became one of the best ropers in the country. Bose Icard rode the Goodnight-loving trail carrying his boss's money because he was the man Charles Goodnight trusted most. Bill Pickett invented a rodeo move that white cowboys copied for decades. None of that made it to the screen. Hollywood took a dirty, low-paying, dangerous job and turned it into the adventure of a white hero in a clean hat. The era of the great cattle drives lasted just over 20 years and ended when barbed wire fenced off the prairie. Number 8. In 1873, a tailor in Reno, Nevada, got tired of hearing the same complaint. The pockets on work pants tore within a week. A lumberjack's wife asked him to make a pair that could handle the job. Jacob Davis had a simple idea. Reinforce the corners of the pockets with copper rivets, the same way horse tack was reinforced. It worked on the first try, but Davis didn't have the $68 needed for the patent fee. So he wrote to the man who sold him fabric in San Francisco, a German merchant named Levi Strauss, and offered him a partnership. On May 20th, 1873, patent number 139-121 was issued. The blue fabric came from a type of twill made in the French city of Nimes. Denims gradually became denim in everyday speech, and no one called them jeans. The name was waist overalls. They were clothes for miners, ranch hands, and railroad workers, tough, ugly, and made to last longer than the body wearing them. It wasn't until the 1950s, when movies put the pants on big-screen rebels, that the word jeans caught on. The symbol of the American West started out as the uniform of people who got up before sunrise. Number 9. The Homestead Act of 1862 promised 160 acres of free land to anyone who could stick it out for 5 years. Thousands loaded up their wagons and headed west. When they got there, they discovered there was no lumber to build a house. They cut blocks of grass with the roots still attached and stacked them like bricks. The soddy, a dark dirt house that dripped mud when it rained. The nearest neighbor was 10 or 15 miles away. Mail came once a month, if it came at all, and the wind never stopped. It blew day and night, month after month, whistling through the tall grass. Doctors at the time gave a name to what came next: prairie madness. It started with insomnia and crying for no reason. Then came silence, the refusal to leave the house, and anger. Territorial asylums in Kansas, Nebraska, and Dakota filled up. Women were hit the hardest. The man went out to the fields or into town. She stayed inside those 4 dirt walls, sometimes going months without seeing another face. Writer Ole Rolvag captured this in Giants in the Earth, with a character who loses her mind from staring at a horizon where nothing ever changes. The land was free. The bill came later. Number 10. The saloon floor was a carpet of spit. When you walked into an Old West saloon, the first thing that caught your attention wasn't the whiskey. It was a wet, repetitive sound coming from every direction. Chewing tobacco hitting the floorboards. Almost every man chewed tobacco back then. Cowboys, miners, poker players, the town sheriff. Owners placed brass spittoons all around the room, some just a few feet apart. The problem was aim. After 2 or 3 drinks, hardly anyone could hit them, and the dark tobacco juice ended up on the floor, on boots, and on the cuffs of other people's pants. Anyone sitting near a spittoon learned to keep their legs tucked in. The solution was to spread sawdust across the floor every day. It was cheap and came from nearby sawmills. It soaked up the spit, the mud tracked in from the dirt street, spilled beer, and blood from fights. The next morning, an employee swept the whole mess outside and spread fresh sawdust. The habit was so common that the simplest bars earned a nickname in the United States: sawdust joints. The name said exactly what was under the feet of anyone ordering another round. Number 11. Gambling was far more common than gunfights. In a frontier town, the constant noise wasn't gunfire. It was chips hitting the table. Pharaoh was king, a fast card game that was easy to learn, and the box that held the deck had a picture of a tiger on it. That's why people said they were going to buck the tiger when they walked into the saloon. Gambling districts became known as tiger towns. Dice and roulette were set up in the back of the room, waiting for anyone who still had a little money left. Here's the part almost no one talks about. Rigged Pharaoh boxes were sold through catalogs at listed prices. Manufacturers in Chicago and San Francisco advertised them without any shame. The gambler didn't lose because of bad luck. He lost because the game was already fixed. A cowboy made about $30 a month. He brought 3 months' worth of pay to the table and walked away with nothing before sunrise. Doc Holliday, before becoming famous for something else, made his living that way. He was a faro dealer in Dodge City and Tombstone. And the violence? That came afterward. Not because of honor or a woman. It came from gambling debts outside the saloon, with the man still not fully understanding how he had lost everything. Number 12. Giving birth could be a death sentence. In the 19th century American West, a woman who got pregnant knew she might not live to see her child grow up. There was no hospital within 100 miles, no anesthesia, and no antiseptics. The nearest doctor, when there was one, took 2 days to arrive on horseback, if he made it at all. With 7 or 8 children over the course of a lifetime, the risk kept adding up. Childbirth happened in a cabin, in a wagon, or on a hard-packed dirt floor. The person helping was a neighbor, a mother-in-law, or a midwife who had learned by watching others work. The hands that delivered the baby were almost never washed because no one yet understood what germs were. That was how puerperal fever became a silent killer. The infection started hours after the birth, and within a week, the mother was dead. There was also hemorrhaging, which could kill within minutes, and obstructed labor, for which there was simply no solution. If the baby didn't turn, mother and child died together. In cemeteries in towns like Deadwood and Tombstone, it is common to see a man's grave surrounded by the graves of 2 or 3 wives, all dead before the age of 30. It wasn't the exception, it was the norm. Number 13. The corset that bent women's ribs. If you walked into a parlor in 1880, you would see women sitting on the edge of their chairs. It wasn't etiquette. They simply couldn't bend their bodies. Under the dress was a corset reinforced with whalebone and steel stays, laced up in the back by someone else. No one could do it alone. Girls started wearing them at around age 12, beginning with a lighter model and tightening them more over time. Their bodies grew inside them. The results can still be seen today. Researchers who examined skeletons from that era found lower ribs pushed inward and spines with unusual wear. The liver and stomach were shifted out of place. The lungs couldn't fully expand, and breathing became shallow. That's what caused the fainting. The explanation was that women were born fragile. There was even a piece of furniture for it in the parlor. The fainting couch. Doctors published warnings as early as the 19th century and were ignored. What brought down the corset wasn't medicine. It was World War I. With men at the front, women went to work in factories, and the steel from corsets was turned into war material.